And now, here's your host of Shaping Success, Wes Tankersley. What is up, everyone? Welcome to Shaping Success with myself and Robert Watson. Robert Watson is a veteran, and it is Veterans Day. So, Robert, happy Veterans Day. And to everyone else who has served.
Absolutely. Surprisingly enough, I've got to go to class today because the university I'm at does not recognize it as a holiday.
That's interesting. You're in Texas. Yeah. You would expect that, but...
Yeah, just not everybody sees it the same way. So,
yeah.
Again, it's life.
Yeah, I had an appointment today that I had set up I thought I had set up, but I never got a response from the person, and it was like, oh, they're closed today. That's why I didn't get a response. And that's kind of the way it is. It's like, this is a holiday that does not get enough. It just doesn't get enough. People don't take care of that. You know, they don't, it seems like the country does not care as much as a lot of us do, which I think is kind of funny because I feel like, you know, we have so much to be thankful for. I started going through my stuff last night and got in a conversation with my dad because every year I think back about my grandfather and my grandfathers, both of them. One was a Navy man and the other one was Navy and Army. So once he finished with the Army, he went in the Navy. And then I have a great grandfather who was in World War II. And I mean, it's just crazy to see all these things happen that, or not World War II, World War I. So, I mean, it's interesting. And all these people who have fought for these freedoms that we had so that we could have just what we had last week when we were able to vote and elect a new president, you know?
Yes. And so I guess we probably should glance off that subject too, since we discussed it last time. I think one of the things that's so amazing is that people really do look at the national government and vote their pocketbook. Mm-hmm. I know that people want to get very ideological, but the reality is it's down to simple things like, are you better off? You know, is my family better off? Do I look at the future and see it positive? And that's really what this was a referendum on. It wasn't necessarily as ideological as people always get bent up about. It just becomes an issue of, you know, it's not been going well for the middle class. Mm-hmm. And you've seen some pundits come out and make the point and say, listen, this was about people voting their pocketbooks, and they wanted people in power that thought they were important.
Yeah.
And so this is why you had this broad coalition, right? This very broad across the board. It is, I know people get all bent out of shape about stuff like this, but really it is about your pocketbook. It is about, you know, why are we pumping money into foreign wars, this kind of stuff. It's funny because when I grew up, we were in Vietnam, right? And so we were always arguing the issue, why are we sending blood and treasure to Vietnam? This is a faraway place. What are we really doing here? We're not defending our interests. Why did we decide that our national interest is being in Vietnam? And, you know, 250,000 casualties, i.e. wounded, 60-some thousand dead. That's a lot for a set of values, right? And when you're not defending your own soil and you change a generation. So these are the kind of things we're trying to decide every time we elect a national government. We're basically saying, hey, these are our priorities.
Yeah.
And whether you like it or not, that's kind of where we're at. And people got all bent out of shape about, Trump's won, now the world's going to come to an end or whatever. And I'm like, be serious, folks. You've already seen 4 years of him. I mean, you may not like his rhetoric, but the world did not come to an end.
Well, and there's so many things that it's like and I've, it doesn't matter what side you're on. Like if you sit there and you look at what it seems like and you see it because you see election season comes up, you click on something, you watch something, next thing you know, it all shows up. It doesn't matter whether you agree with it or not. So like a lot of time I'm getting red and blue stuff in my TikTok feed all day long. And there's a lot of weird stuff going on right now. It's like there's a lot of women out there that are shaving their heads, this 4B movement or whatever the heck that is. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Like, no matter what side you're on, if you were doing that on the right or if you were doing that on the left, what's your deal? I don't get this.
Yeah.
Like, we have to be, you know, we have to be normal about this. This is insane. It's like you didn't get what you want, but if you look at it, just like the last time, half the country didn't get what they want. Now this time, half the country didn't get what they want. But it seems like, well, more than or less than half the country this time. But it's just crazy. It's like it's insane to me to see how people digest this and how they run with this and how they think that they're actually doing something. The reality is if those people feel that bad about it that they're going to go shave their head, that's insane. I just don't get it.
Yeah. There were protests yesterday, I was told. And here's the thing. I put on a uniform and picked up a weapon and stood a post to defend their right to do that.
Yeah.
Listen, if you want to protest and you get a permit, go for it. Here's the point. I support you 100% raising your voice in peaceful dissent. Absolutely. I think you should absolutely get out there and do whatever you think you need to do.
Yeah.
Because again, that's what this country's about. I want to hear your voice. If you don't like what happened, raise your voice. Sure. Absolutely. If you like what happened, protest positively. That's what we're about. Just
Right.
make sure we can do the same thing over and over again. We can agree to disagree, right? We can have a civil conversation. We can have a
Yep.
civil debate. Protest civilly, right? Be respectful, but protest. I want to hear your voice.
Yeah, and it's funny because I see someone posted something in here, and Nikki kind of blocked them out. But the reality is like they're talking about, oh, well, January 6th, you did this, you guys stormed the Capitol, and you guys like sitting there pointing the finger at like all of a sudden we're those people.
I'm
Uh,
one of those guys. Yeah.
yeah, you did that. Good job. You did that. Y'all did that. You know, the reality is that there was a few people who did that, just like there were in other things, and it's insane to think that that you think that that's okay. No one said it was okay. No one said anything about that. But the reality is there's a lot of misinformation about that as well, just like there is with anything else that's going on. You're only seeing half the thing. It's amazing how this stuff is starting to kind of disappear a little bit because they're realizing that it's not getting them anywhere.
It's not getting any traction. Listen, I'll be the first one to say that I don't think that was a particularly good idea to storm the Capitol building. I mean, of all the things that I want to protest, storming the building is not my favorite option. I
Right.
have a few others, but I also understand people that get passionate and do stupid shit. Let's call it that.
Yep.
Um, are the people on the other end, were they scared? I'm sure they were. I mean, was it overblown? I don't know. I wasn't there. But
Yeah.
here's the point. That would not have been my first choice.
Yep.
But then my second choice probably wouldn't have been roll the military out in Washington, D.C. for the better part of a month.
Yeah.
And the reason why I know that is my son was there.
Mhm.
And I was like, what does it look like? He said, it's locked completely down. And I said, really? In a free country, we lock the Capitol down? What do we think was happening? A protest turns into a lockdown? That seems odd to me.
Yep.
But again,
It's pretty crazy, though. I think that the biggest thing that I see from this and it being Veterans Day and being thankful for the people who went and fought for our freedoms is the reality that there's a lot of people who say that they despise the military. They don't think it's a great thing. They don't think this. They don't think that, blah, 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 blah. But they're spitting in the people's face who went there to make it so that it was okay for you to say the things that you're saying right now. So just remember that. Whether you like the military or not, the reality is that they fought so that we can have a free country and be able to say what we want to say within reason. So that's the big thing.
right. And here's the cool part about our country. Think about this. We can argue openly about whether Vietnam was a good choice or not. We can argue openly about whether Afghanistan and Iraq were good choices. I love that. I loved being in a country where we can argue about that. I don't particularly like any of the wars, and I don't see the point in any of them. But again, that no one consulted me. Okay.
Yeah.
The point is we can openly disagree. I was reading this book written in 1966 called The Arrogance of Power by Senator Fulbright. And he basically said it was our duty as citizens to critique our government. It was our duty to critique it. and to say, this is where because he said the nature of critique is to make it better.
Hmm.
Right? Now, think about that for a second. Instead of looking at critique as you're being some kind of negative, critique is about making it better. And we should always be in a country that we want to make better.
Right.
So please raise your voice. Please critique things because why? We want to make it better. And so, yeah, it was interesting because one of my professor when I said that, but he basically recommended the book to me. Now, I mean, it's obscure. It's a 1966 edition,
Hmm.
but I love that piece in there about it's our duty to critique because we believe it can better. That is so cool. But he's also talking about the arrogance of power. When you get so much power, you tend to use it when you shouldn't.
Yep.
And is that's America probably in Vietnam, it is in Iraq and Afghanistan. And you sent my brethren in uniform to do something they should have never probably had to do.
Yep.
But again, it's one of those things. Thank God we can have an open debate about it.
Yep.
That's the part I love.
Yeah, and I think that we can tie this into a lot of things that we talk about, but critique, like you said, is basically to criticize, which people think of criticize in a negative connotation. And I think that you have to realize that if you are open-minded about that word, you'll understand that it is made to make you better. What happens to you when you are criticized? They're taking some of the things that you're doing and they're trying to make it better. I remember when I was in high school, my senior English class, you're going to write a book critique. And it's like, what the hell's a book critique? And it's basically your thoughts about what you think about the book, what's going to make it better, what would have kept you more engaged, whether you liked it or not. Because let's be honest, we don't like all books that come in and out. So we had to criticize the book. And if you talk to me and you tell me about something that I'm doing that you think I could improve on, in my positive mindset is that I'm going to take what that is and I'm going to look at it. And now you could be right, you could be wrong, but I'm going to start dissecting that, thinking about that and trying to figure out if you're right. And if you're right, how can I fix the situation? If you're wrong, I'm going to talk to you about why I think you're wrong. And then we can have a conversation about that and try and fix the situation, whatever it is.
Well, it's also interesting because you drill down on something really important. When we do peer review as academics,
Hmm.
it's about making the paper better. You don't attack the person.
Yeah.
You critique the paper. What would make the paper better? In America, we should be looking at the policy and saying, what would make the policy better?
Right.
And somebody says, well, let's be part. No, let's not. Let's make the policy better. If you think that we're doing something wrong, let's critique it and let's make the policy better. It
Yeah.
doesn't have to be about you and me. It doesn't have to get personal. And I think that's probably a great place to begin from critiquing. So if I say something like, um, here's how I think we can make the podcast better, I'm not attacking you.
Right.
I'm talking about the product.
Yeah.
The product we're putting out, here's my suggestion how you and I can make the product better.
Right.
If you would do this and I would do this, I think we would get more attention. Right?
Yep.
It's an
Yeah.
idea. We don't even know if the idea is going to work.
Yeah.
Right? We're just going to try it. Or you just say, I don't think we're being as clear as we need to be. And that's when you do peer review academic is when you have to defend something, it's really interesting. It gets better and more refined in your mind.
Right.
When you have to make a presentation and say, this is what my idea is, and then you have to listen to the way other people hear your idea, then you're like, oh,
Yep.
yeah, you're right. That didn't it sounded better in my head than it did when you said it.
Yep.
You're right. That needs to be changed. That needs to be smoothed out.
Yeah, we've got Liquid Chano in the house, who's a friend of mine. I'm trying to get back to it. It says criticism healthy when welcomed on both sides. That's the issue. People aren't willing to work. And yes, that's 100% true. It's you have to be willing to make that better, talk about it, discuss it, and work through that. It's funny as we're talking about this critique, I'm sitting here thinking about as I was a teacher, like what we're doing, is there's a lot of things. I was listening to All In podcast this week, and again, one of my favorite like kind of both sides podcasts because it's not just about political issues, although they've been talking about that going on because that's what's going on, right? But they were talking about the education system and how there are people who are taking this education system and they, instead of, taking the way that it used to be when I was in school when I was growing up was like I was a middle range student, right? Like I wasn't a great student, I wasn't the best student, I wasn't the worst student, right? Like I had decent grades, I was average. Now they would take those above average kids because they didn't want them to sink to the average kid and give them stuff that was harder to do because they understood that and they could do that. And then the below average, they would put them in a lower group and they would help them work. Well, now that became this trophy mentality thing where like no one can be bad at whatever they're doing. So they're deciding that they're not going to challenge those kids anymore. And then they're going to try and work really hard with those other kids to get them to average instead of building this. And that's kind of one of the things that we've been going through as a country as well, is like we want everyone to be average. We want everyone to be the same. And the problem is that's not the way that it works. We need, in education especially, we need some of these very high intelligent people to do the things. We need the Elon Musks. We need those people who are, I'm trying to think of some other ones because I don't want to just camp on Elon, but there's quite a few intelligent people. Bill Gates, Steve like
Jobs. Go ahead.
Steve Jobs. Yeah, exactly. Sorry, I lost track of who they are or all these people are, but those people, without being, what would have happened if we would have throttled them when they were younger? We wouldn't have a lot of the things that we have. We wouldn't be sitting here on Ecamm, on this Mac, on this iPhone, using Microsoft Windows, driving around electric cars. Like there's these things that we have to be able to be okay with people being smarter and people not being as smart and people being in the middle. And if they want to work, then that's what they do. And that's part of going through the education system, is being criticized on what you do. As a teacher, we have a rubric that we have to work through, and you have to get this many points to get an A. Instead, now we're like, oh, well, you can redo it. You can try again. And that just doesn't, I've never seen that be helpful,
Well, yeah, and also too, think about go back to sports again because it's such a good analogy. Again, you got a football team, you got 11 people on one side of the ball. Not everybody's the quarterback, not everybody's the center, not everybody's the wide receiver. Everybody according to their gifts, right?
Right.
And we used to laugh all the time, right? If you get ready, go back to throw a pass, and the cornerback steps in front, and you hit him right in the hands. The corner, the defensive player, you hit him in the hands, and he drops it. We used to make the joke that's why he's on defense, because if he was on offense, he would have caught it. But again, everybody to their gifting, and we're in the world of creating average, and that's not the way the world is.
Right.
The world is literally, as you say, we have somebody who has a gifting this direction, who's really, really fast, really, really small. Well, he doesn't need to be a lineman. Okay, he needs to be a wide receiver. I mean, This is not really difficult stuff. It's just that in our culture, we've decided that, this is a very norming kind of look at things, and you just don't need to do that. Because guess what? The person that is a below average student has other gifts.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you're taking academics and making it the end all. It's not. What if that person is great with their hands, great woodworking? Yeah. Are we supposed to say we don't want that in our culture?
Right. Yeah, you got a person who can do all the equations and calculate what the 2x4 can hold as far as structure goes, so that it doesn't fall down. And then you have the person who can actually take that 2x4 and make something with it. That's the way that I look at it. It depends. There's people who are from all kinds of walks of life. I've personally always tried to be able to do everything. I'm not excellent at anything, but I can do pretty much anything. It's crazy, but that's the thing. You have some people that are really good with numbers, and you have some people who are really good with, hammer and nails.
Well, my late father was so amazing in one respect. He could do anything with metal, anything, get things to the highest tolerance. He was just fantastic with it.
Yeah.
But do not give that man a hammer and nails and wood.
Right.
Okay. Because for a man who can get tolerances on metal, oh my God, his woodworking was horrible.
Right.
And you would think, well, no, he can still. No. People that work with wood don't necessarily work with metal. I mean, so. But again, he was real good to understand that he was so talented at this one thing and the other things he weren't. That's
Yep.
life.
And
It's
there's a
like all of
great.
us.
I feel like there's a shift, and I'm assuming that you've saw this shift before too, because I remember like sitting there. There's certain things that are happening. There's certain things that we're finding out that we need to do, and like physical education as a teacher. When I was a physical education teacher, I was going through the. We part of it is going through the history of what physical education was like. In the 40s, 50s, there wasn't a whole lot of it. And then all of a sudden, we start having these wars and we're finding out that we're not as strong as the other countries. So we have more physical fitness classes and we're making our kids stronger because they're not quite strong enough to be able to do the things that they need to do. Same
Right.
thing with education, in the late 90s, early 2000s, it was everyone needs to go to college. Everyone needs to go to college because we all need to have degrees because we all have to do this. We all have to do that. Now everyone's got a degree in liberal studies and or liberal arts and they can't do anything other than what they could do before. And we start to lose these skilled labor people who are builders, constructions, painters, plumbers, all those skilled things because we were told that you need to go to college. And now we're getting that shift back. The trade schools are coming back in. Now we're going to have trade schools because we need these people to be able to do these trades as well. So I find it hard to believe that they just kind of keep concentrating on the wrong things instead of just allowing what happens to happen.
It was interesting because one of the things I learned about Exxon, huge company, they had developed, oh, this is probably 40 years ago. They developed a twin track for their people graduating from college, right? Especially
Mhm.
like geologists and stuff. So the two track was you stay on a technical track, which is you're going to stay a geologist or in some kind of technical aspect your entire time. And the other track is you're going on to management.
Right.
And they allowed them to split and they allowed them both to make good money down the road, right? In other
Hmm.
words, it wasn't just the manager who made money, but the technical expertise. Because they realized when everybody got shuttled the same way, that they lost their technical expertise and they didn't want to. They said, listen, we need to keep this. This is institutional knowledge
Right.
that we're losing because we're forcing everybody to be a manager so they can make more money. That doesn't make any sense. We've got to have some kind of technical expertise. And the point is that you learn that over time that again, that everything doesn't necessarily fit. Like, why do we have people that are really good at fixing cars and air conditioning unit and building houses and things like that? Because we need all those things.
Yeah.
We don't need just a bunch of managers. Because remember what college is creating. What is an MBA? Master's in Business Administration. What are you? You're a manager,
Yep.
right? Who's going to do the work? If everybody's a manager, who's doing the work?
Yeah. And that's
And
you
should
think about
everybody
it.
be a manager?
There's a lot. Yeah. No, not everyone's going to be a manager. Not everyone's going to rise to the top. That's all there is to it. But it's amazing to look at, like, you can even break this down a little bit more and go, hey, look at all this stuff that we're shipping over to overseas, right? To do this, to do the work, right? We're shipping
Mhm.
this. It's basically a skilled thing. We're shipping it over to their skilled people to put this together, their labor skilled people to
Right.
put this together so that we don't have to do it anymore. So now we're creating
Right.
something that we don't have. We don't have what we need here, and essentially teaching people that that's not an important skill because we can just ship it off to someone else. And I understand there's a lot more tied to it, but just think about that. Think about what we're sending, where we're sending it, how we're sending it, and where that's going, and how it's not helping the country or helping the country.
Well, in 1941, two economists got together and they said, hey, listen, I've got a proof, an economic proof. And here's what the proof says that if you take a country that has an advantage in capital and you have a country who has an advantage in labor, and the advantage in labor is meaning it's cheaper.
Hmm.
And so if they trade with each other, what will happen is the capital intensive country will ship its labor stuff over to the cheap country. And they know that what happens when you do that is that the labor in the capital intensive country, like the United States versus China, the labor in the capital intensive country gets screwed.
Hmm.
Okay. And what they said is listen, we all benefit in the long run from cutting that deal, sending the labor over to China. However, to balance the equation, you must bribe. So understand what I just said, bribe the loser in the labor market in the capital intensive country in the United States. You must bribe them. Here's what happened after World War II. We did just that. We basically shipped our labor over slowly but surely, right? Well, you didn't bribe the labor. You have to bribe the labor. We didn't. And so what happened, you had this extraction, and this is a number that's going to be staggering, in north of $40 trillion, trillion with a T, was taken out by the top 10% of our country from the bottom 90. If you want to know why the middle class is going, and again, this is not me, this is the RAND Institute, a very conservative think tank that has been around since the 40s. And they basically said 40 trillion. So if you wonder why the middle class is hollowed out, there you go. This isn't a surprise. So what did Trump tap into? The problem that's been going on since 1974, which is this massive extraction of wealth from the middle class because you did not bribe them because of the labor issue. You didn't bribe them. What should you have? Some kind of trickle down. You have to give them some benefit. There's lots of ways to solve it. But the point is, we knew about it. And guess what? Nobody did anything about it.
Yeah.
So what happens? What happens in this case 50 years later, 49 years later today? What happens? People are pissed.
Right.
Okay? They're just pissed because they said, you know, what's happening? This is the first generation in America, and we've seen the stats, where you and I don't believe our kids will be better off than we were.
Yeah.
Okay? That's
Well,
a big deal.
it's tough too because that, it just goes back to what we've talked about before. Like, I feel like we have been, obviously you're a different generation than I am, but your generation, which is the same as my parents' generation, were like, hey, we want you to do everything that you didn't have to, so that you don't have to do what we had to do. We don't want you to
Right?
struggle. And that's the
Right.
goal, is no one wants to struggle, right? Well, in reality, that you're not struggling part is kind of a injustice to the next generation, because now that's getting passed on. Like, I think about like all the things that I had to do when I was a kid, and it was less than what my parents had to do. But now I'm looking at my kids going, they're complaining about not having a pair of Air Force Ones. It's like, shit, I had to go to work to get the money to pay for those Air Force Ones. Like, everyone, there was people that, you had that were wealthy. I remember when I was in high school, they were walking around wearing Jordans, which were at the time like $100 pair of shoes. My parents could only afford the $50 pair of shoes out of the JCPenney catalog. I mean, that was what we did. And now we're like, whatever, no big deal. We're just going to get it. We're just going to keep handing this stuff over, and then kids don't learn to work for that. They don't learn to do the things that they need to do in order to, earn on their own. And they think it's just going to be given to them. And then now we have a generation who says, why should I have to go to work 5 days a week? I could go whenever I want. Why should I have to go into work? I'm going to work from home, like all these things. And this is the easiest. I want the easy way out.
Yeah. And we go back to that same analogy I said to you before, NFL, no free lunch. There is no
Yep.
free lunch. Come on, guys. Stop.
Yep.
Okay? There you have to work in every generation, and the idea that one generation gets a pass is crazy.
Well, and you
Not
have to
gonna
think
happen.
about it too, even like with this student loan forgiveness, right? Like when I was growing up, you see all these people take the student loans, right? And there is student loan forgiveness for public service forgiveness. And I agree. I think that that's great. Let's give that to the people who went out there and they were doing the public service, because that's what they're doing. But you look at it, and how many times are these people who all now they've got this litigation with the student loans of everyone, because Biden and Harris said that everyone's going to get it forgiven, or we're going to find a way to forgive a certain amount to everyone, and they don't think that that money's going to come from somewhere. Like, where is your money going? Where do you think it's going? If you earn $100,000 a year, but in reality you're only able to spend 50,000 of that because you're sending the rest of it to the federal government for taxes, where do you think that's going? And then you're getting taxed for the food you eat, and then you're getting taxed for the things that you do. It's insane. It all comes from somewhere. Someone is going to pay for it, and you're going to pay for it. You just don't realize how you're going to pay for it.
Yeah. Yeah, again, there is no free lunch. And
Yeah.
so we do have to decide from a national priority standpoint, where we are, what we're trying to do. That government money chasing through the college system caused the vast escalation in college costs. I
Right.
mean, the difference between when I first went to college and the second time around is huge.
Hmm.
Is huge, and some of it is just completely unwarranted. Meaning, you look at it and you say, "What is the cost of living increase? What is the cost of tuition increase?" It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Why? Because you're not able to get something of quality, meaning that degree is not worth what it was
Right.
in real terms. And that's the challenge we always have to face is, listen, you're crowding out the good jobs with having a whole lot of college graduates.
Yep.
Again, an oversupply, if you will.
Yep. And it's got to go back the other way. I mean, I think you see a lot of people now are like, well, why should I go to college when I can make the same amount of money without doing it? And there's got
Yeah.
to be some reform. That's all there is to it. That's
Yeah.
that's the reality of it. We need to reform the education system. I don't know what the right answer is, but we're going to see, what this administration thinks versus what the other one thinks. And I'm interested to see, because I'm going to live through it, what happens in the next 10, 20 years. My daughter talked to me about going to college the other day, and I said, listen, I had to pay for my college. I have other family members who didn't go to college, and I have other family members who didn't pay for their education. We all do what we're supposed to do. One's very skilled. The other one is, we're both really skilled. I have a degree that I paid for that I don't even use. I have 2 degrees that I paid for that I don't even use. So you think long and hard about what you want to do. And if you want to dedicate yourself to doing it, if you think that it's something that you need to do, well, then you better start saving some money. I'll help you as much as I can, but I'm not giving you, just like you said, there's no free lunch here. We're going to get this squared away so that you can have to work for what you're trying to do.
You value what you work for.
Yep, exactly.
In simple terms. Yeah.
Yep.
Great
Robert,
conversation, man.
Yep, great conversation. Appreciate you hopping on. We will see you Wednesday. Thank you, everyone,
Absolutely.
for being here. If you want to get more, just please make sure you subscribe, like, share, go listen to the podcast. It's getting close. I was like 80 away from 50,000 downloads over the last 5 years. So hopefully you can help me get that pumped up. Go over to Shaping Success with Wes Tankersley. We need to change the title. We're working on that. I've said that for a year now. So maybe it's time we start getting
We'll
that
get there.
changed up. But please make sure that you subscribe. Check out Robert's book, R is Victorious. We'll talk. We got one more chapter. We're going to try and get through that, but we've been bouncing back and forth between a bunch of other things because there's a lot going on in the world. And until next time, we challenge you to find the shape of your success.
Bye-bye now.
We'll see ya.